All right, guys, welcome to week three. This is going to mainly talk about a couple of different things. We're going to talk about a lot of communication with athletes, and we're going to talk about the domains of coaching. And so, a couple of things, just some announcements. First of all, the only work you have this week is the post, which will require you to look at the NASB standards, which are listed under week three. What I'm going to go over in this lecture is I'm going to talk about just some high points of communicating with your athletes, and these lecture notes are posted for you to look at. And then also I want to talk real quick, guys, about the importance of, most of you guys are doing a good job, but understand that these forums each count 5 points. And so it doesn't take very many of them not doing the forums to really impact your grade. And keep in mind that those assignments are a huge part of your grade. So there's not a ton of work to do in this, but you have to make yourself do it. So let's get to communicating with your athletes. So a couple of things. There's really three ways of communicating. There's you sending messages and your team receiving them. And sometimes it gets lost in both of those. Sometimes the coach sends it, players just don't listen. Sometimes the coach does a crappy job of talking, and the players listen, but they don't understand it. Understand that there's also verbal and nonverbal communication. So, a huge deal. I'm a big believer in nonverbal communication, meaning I don't talk. I can just look at a kid, and they understand what I'm saying or what I want them to do or not do. And then understand that communication is part content, which means what it is you want to say, and part emotion. Okay, and sometimes I think coaches have a lot of really good things to say, but they're so dry and unexcited about the way they send it that their players just don't buy into it. And so, from the standpoint of coaches, they're often a lot better at sending messages rather than listening. They're a lot better at verbal communication rather than nonverbal. And they're better at controlling their content and not the emotion. So, a couple things just to understand, just some steps to communicating. You have to know what you want to say. You have to develop what it is you're going to say. You have to figure out the best way to get it across, whether it be verbal or nonverbal. Then your athletes have to actually listen. They have to interpret what it is you're trying to tell them to do or ask them to do or say to them, and then they have to respond. And so there's several deals why this doesn't work or failures in communicate. And I'll go through them pretty quick, but sometimes a coach just doesn't communicate the right stuff at the right time. And maybe they need to use verbal skills and they tried to use nonverbal or vice versa, but the message just wasn't sent correctly. Sometimes athletes just flat out don't pay attention. Sometimes they don't have the skills to understand what it is. Sometimes coaches talk over kids' heads. Sometimes kids they misinterpret what it is a coach actually wants them to do or what he actually means. And then sometimes coaches just don't send consistent messages, meaning that they're not consistent with what they're saying. One day they say this, the next day they say that. The good thing about communicating with your athletes is like any skill, you can get better at it. And so here's just kind of some skills, and I won't go through every bit of this. I'm just going to hit the high points. You can read over this, but these are just some skills to develop. First, you need to be credible, meaning that you need to be honest about what you know, okay? And you need to be able to get across in a fairly positive way. And your athletes here's the thing, athletes are the best judge, and kids in general are the best judge of character. They know when you're BSing them. So if you want to have credibility, be calm under pressure and be able to be consistent, meaning that you're consistent with your message all the time. Try to be positive. Okay, that's not always easy. It doesn't mean that you're trying to overlook bad things. It doesn't mean that you're a pushover. It just means that no matter how bad the things are going, you're trying to support your athletes and you're trying to trying to be positive with and build their character. That doesn't mean you sugarcoat it or any of that stuff. It just means that you're upbeat with them. When you send messages to them, send messages that are high in information, meaning that don't assume anything. Best example I can give you is what I'm about to read to you, and this is kind of a good example. Jonathan, please look at the second receiver instead of only watching your first option. This is talking about a quarterback. So that's a good example. Bad example is, Jonathan, why won't you listen to me? You keep making the same mistake. Well, that second point, yeah, they're making a mistake, but you're not telling them what it is. So send messages that mean something. Communicate with consistency. Basically, just be consistent with what it is you're doing with your players, and they'll trust you. A big one is learn how to listen. That to me is one of the biggest things about coaching. You can learn so much from other coaches and athletes if you'll just shut up and listen to them, honestly. And you have to be able to empathize with them, and that's hard sometimes, because sometimes you don't care what they have to say. You're tired of hearing their excuses when really sometimes all they need is for you just to act like you care and show them that you care and respect them, and it changes the whole relationship. And then improve your nonverbal communication, meaning learn how to use body language to convey what it is you're trying to do. Sometimes that might be the way that you talk. Somebody might be that, physical, like slapping hands, fist bump, that type of thing. And probably the most important thing is to remember that you're a role model. Okay, your players, believe it or not, will model exactly what they see out of you. If you're negative, they'll be negative. If you're positive, they'll be positive. And so that's a huge thing to learn. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, you don't have an assignment due this week, but I want to talk about those of you who want to get ahead of the one that's going to be due at the end of next week, which is week 4, is levels of coaching. What you're going to do is a PowerPoint, and you're going to have a slide for each division, and basically you're going to pick a school from each of these: NCAA Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA, junior college, and high school. And basically you're going to put these things about each school on the slide. Okay, the name of the school, the level of the school, logo, conference logo, who's the school president or principal, who's the main athletic director, who are the assistant athletic director. And then you're going to put a conclusion slide that details what you learned about the various levels of sport. So you guys are doing good. Keep it up. Stay up on the post this week. That's all you have to do. So it's a lighter week, and I enjoyed it so far.